We play a lot of Opie going after Anthony, and Anthony rarely responds. So when Anthony responded this week, I figured maybe we should take a look at this, get the other side for once, for goodness sake. By the way, Anthony Cumia apparently working for WABC Radio in New York. Anthony
Oh,
Cumia is returning to radio.
for Sid Rosenberg, political show, I believe.
Yeah, well, they're doing different shows. It's the same station as Sid, but I don't know if Anthony's
Okay.
doing mornings or middays. I guess it's not affecting his other show. I never understand why these guys want to get back into radio, but I guess if
Mhm.
Anthony's still doing his podcast, then it's just kind of proving he can still do it. I wonder if some of that is a fuck you to Opie because
Well,
Opie so
yes.
desperately wants to get back onto radio.
So the show from MLC that was banned is up
Yeah,
on Rumble right now. It has this guest who's like an author and wrote a book with Anthony. And
right.
his theory is like, oh, he's only taking this job to fuck with Opie. He doesn't care about the money. He's like, just let me sign that contract.
I
And
like
email it to Opie.
spite employment. I like ruining your days.
Yes,
Just spite Opie. I do respect that.
yeah.
So good for Anthony. It'll be interesting to see. I, I can't imagine he won't be able to do it. As far like he'll obviously stick to FCC guidelines and everything. He's a pro as far as
Mhm.
that's concerned. Although you know what, maybe I don't know. He's not been on radio in a long time. That business has changed.
Right.
I
Well,
wonder if Anthony's gonna get sick of that very quickly, just because of all the restrictions that would be in play now. Is WABC still owned by ABC, or is that
I
just
think
a
it was. I think it's just a title. I think all of them were
okay?
sold together
Gotcha.
and sold out of it because the radio
Because that
business
would
was
be that
starving.
would make no sense if they were owned by Disney.
No, I don't think so. But also, the author did say that with talks with this ABC, if Trump wouldn't have won, like the atmosphere that we're in now contributed to Anthony getting the job because they're a little more lax on sort of the racist.
Cancel
past.
culture is over, baby. We won.
Yeah, we did.
We did it,
Yeah.
gang. So shout out to Anthony. That's very interesting. The idea that he's going to be back on radio. I'll be curious to see how that plays out. I was going to say, I can't imagine a guy Anthony's age and all he's accomplished. He's going to want to be back on regular radio and deal with all that bullshit. But I guess it's something he can just walk away whenever he wants if he's not enjoying it. You know?
I think it's the ultimate challenge to kind
Yeah.
of go back and use words in a fun way where you can't say,
Yeah.
like
If you're doing both, if he said I'm quitting my podcast to do
oh yeah,
radio,
no, forget
that
about
makes
it.
no sense to do AM radio. But
Yeah. Then an inward will drop out. A bomb will drop out on AM radio if you don't let him do his
you
own
can't
thing.
keep him bottled up like that all day.
Yes. All right, this first one's called Trolls.
Okay, yeah. So this is Anthony talking about the Opster and dealing with trolls.
He loses his fucking mind when he looks into
This
his
is also
chat,
Stalin
which he
19.
does
Shout out to Stalin.
constantly during his what he would like to call a show. And then somebody will say something like, "Did you hear Anthony was shitting on you with his friends or something?" And they're lying. They just, I might have mentioned his show or his name came up when I was talking about O&A, and the trolls know it. Like he gets like 30 views during his live streams. He gets 30 people that watch live. And out of that, I have to assume that maybe 5, and that I'm really giving him the benefit of the doubt here. Maybe 5 of those people are actual fans. I would assume the other 25 are hate watching, are trolls building up a rapport so they could pull the trigger at some point, or they're sarcastically trying to annoy him about me. Some of them just pop right in and go, Anthony was shit talking you. And then without any checking or anything, he just goes, he's soulless, that prick, and then just starts shitting all over me when I hadn't really done much of anything. I'll critique his show.
That's all accurate, by the way. I've listened to both shit on each other. And when Anthony does it, he makes fun of Opie's show. I mean, to say critique, he shits on Opie's show. Like, that's the one area where Anthony's being disingenuous or maybe tongue-in-cheek. Like, he shits on Opie's show. But he makes fun of the show that Opie is putting out there to the public. Opie will call Anthony a racist, a terrible guy. Like Opie will really get personal with it, whereas Anthony is making fun of the show. Now, I will say, this has all been said before between these two. Part of the reason I wanted to play this is because I wanted to ask the question, how long does this go on? Like, these two men are in their 60s. They haven't worked together in almost 11 years now. It's been over 10 years since they worked together. They haven't spoken to each other in 9 years, 8 maybe. I think it was like 2016, 2017. They did those shows on Opie's show together, or the crossover shows that they did. So 8, 9 years they haven't spoken to each other. Like, when does this end where they stop shitting on each other and just have separate lives? I guess my answer might be never.
Never.
Because Opie needs that. If you look at Opie's views, Anthony could take a break. I suspect on WABC, Opie's name probably won't ever be mentioned. If you look at Opie's feed, the only videos anyone watches are Opie slams Anthony. The Opie and Anthony show would have been better without Jim Norton. Just like, stupid shit to try and get a reaction from people. And people are, as I know with Why You Laughing, people are thirsty for Opie and Anthony content. Like, those are some of my most viewed videos is Opie and Anthony related stuff because it left such an impact. It left people wanting more. So people are thirsty for that content. And Opie's aware of that. Anthony has found other stuff to talk about. It might not seem like it here. But I guess that is what I wonder is like, how many more times does Anthony respond before he's just like, I can't do this anymore? They're both guilty. Like they are both guilty in this. Opie is obviously much worse, but Anthony responding gives Opie oxygen, I think.
Do they ever do a show again together?
I'm done with that. There's no point.
Okay.
Unless they would have it out and talk. That's the only way a reunion show is and you can't do it at Skankfest. Like the idea of doing it in front of an audience, I think is very silly. The idea of 3 of them in a room talking about their issues is intriguing to me. I liked when Opie and Anthony sort of had a reunion and talked for the first time on air. It was a nice moment. You saw their chemistry immediately snap back, but they didn't talk about any of their issues.
Right.
It gets very phony with the 2 of them. They were never able to address those head on. What would give Opie and Anthony fans closure, and we could finally stop talking about these 2, is if they did a show together in the same room, hopefully with Jim Norton. I don't think Norton would do it. But if they did a show together in the same room and said, I hated that you waited to the last second to negotiate our contracts and you didn't tell anyone about it. You would come in a pissy mood. And Opie could say, I hated that you showed up late. I think that you made Reddit accounts. That's an accusation that's been made by Danny Ross, is that Anthony made Reddit accounts to shit on Opie. That's something real that they could talk about, whether or not that happened. I just don't think either of them are capable of doing it. I think Opie's very delusional, and Anthony is very non-confrontational. So I don't think it's ever going to come together. But that's the only way I'd ever give a fuck about a reunion. If they just got together and talked about the news, who would give a fuck?
No, you need
I think you should mediate that show, Mike.
I was just.
I would love
to.
I would
that
love
or Dr. Phil. Dr.
I don't
Phil,
know.
like get him in a room,
I don't know that I've earned that. I would like all the Opie and Anthony fans, like, who is this man? why is he part of this?
I mean, you do the history of comedy, so it makes total sense to me.
I would love that. I think I'm the right man for the job, but I don't think I would be thought of.
Gearheads, you got thumbs. You know
Get
what
the
to
word
do.
out there, guys. Tell Cumia.
Yes. This next one's called Archives.
He's talking about how Opie literally puts their shows up and then claims like, I don't want anything to do with Opie and Anthony. He's like, I tried to move on from the O&A show, but then Anthony brings up some good points.
We did the O&A show. Look at the archives. And I'm just talking to the general public. Look and see how many of my shows are tagged with Opie and Anthony. How about that? Look at how many titles of my shows throughout 11 years since I was booted from SiriusXM. 11 years of shows. And tell me how many have Opie and Anthony in the title or Opie and Anthony as a tag or something. as opposed to this guy who still likes to start his shows with the same song that we started our show with.
Oh, that's lame.
Yeah. Oh, he does. He does like a different version of I think it's Street Fighting Man by Rage Against the Machine. That was the signature Opie and Anthony song. And Opie used like a kind of a knockoff version of that. It was very cheesy, but because Opie insulates himself, he never has to talk about this stuff, which is so the opposite of what the Opie and Anthony show was. So it is frustrating, and that's why people still talk about Opie and Anthony to this day. I know a lot of people think like, oh, it's lame to care about a radio show. There was no closure on that show. And the idea that one of the guys is still so bitter and angry, and they never had it out, they never talked about these issues. I think it is fascinating to a lot of people, and I, as a fan, definitely get it. But psychologically, I think it's also very interesting to watch a guy tag all of his shows with Opie and Anthony stuff, and then when someone mentions it in his chat, go, "Oh, why do I have to address Anthony?" It's like, well, because you made your life around. It would be like if Anthony went on his show and was like, "Oh, why do you ask me about black people?" It's like, well, because it's all you talk about on fucking Twitter, Anthony.
Also, the fall with Opie, because I mean, it's kind of surreal that we have, we're a small channel, 2 years in, we're proud of ourselves, but we are competing on the same level with one of the greatest radio people ever. What? That makes no sense. How does he have no listeners, no follow? Like he's unwatched
Because he never did anything. He was never interested in anything. I was thinking of this
That's
today.
crazy.
I was thinking of this today where Opie is very interested in radio. Do a show making fun of radio. Like he's fascinated about getting back into radio. Like do kind of the Jocktober stuff that you used to do. You know what I mean? Like do anything you're interested in. I think Opie has a very tiny pool of interests.
Mm-hmm.
Figure out one of those that you're most expert in and talk about that. Anthony's been telling him that for years, and Opie won't listen, and he just focuses on the anger stuff.
My guess is he's also unproducible. Like he seems like a guy where if you're trying to like produce the show and hey, we should do this. I'm not doing that, doggy. Like everything's I've done it. You don't know what I'm doing. I've been here.
Right.
Like it'd be impossible to work with him.
Right. It's saying I've done it. I did it. Why would I do that? While actively trying to do it. You know what I mean? Like while sitting at Gephard's with Dan the waiter or whatever the fucking guy's name is, and trying to be a shock jock again, and then say like, why would I do that? Why would I've already done it. Why would I need to do that?
Meanwhile, I got Jake Hudson. Jake Hudson, welcome in. That's what he's
Those were not Jake Hudson, but like everyone said this a million times. But his best shows were when he had Tukey and Cardiff on.
Yeah,
But I think he got like embarrassed by that or something. Like he thinks he's above it, so he stopped doing it, I guess.
Yeah, not a good idea. They rocket shipped right past him.
It's again, people get so obsessed with making fun of Opie and shitting on Opie and talking about how terrible he was, and I get that. I partake in it very often. But what you forget is like Opie wasn't all bad. It's not every segment in Opie Anthony history that you could listen to. It's a lot of them, but there are some where you're like, oh, Opie was really good here. And again, like when you talk about him with Cardiff, where like he's having fun, it might not be for me. I probably wouldn't listen to it, but it would be better than just staring into the camera and going, "Oh, you got to ask me about Anthony." You know, like he's not capable of making that entertaining. So you figure something else out.
Next one's called Loyalty.
Well, this has been heavily talked about with Opie, where like he thinks that all these people were assholes. Like, oh, Jim Norton's an asshole, Anthony's an asshole, Travis is an asshole, Sam's an asshole, E-Rock's an asshole, Steve C was an asshole, Rich Voss is an asshole, Bob Kelly's an asshole. All these people because they stopped associating with Opie. And there's no one that Opie can point to and be like, this guy stuck by me. Literally, it's a great metaphor. He's sitting by himself in his house that was paid for by all these great comics. And he's just alone. He's a man on an island by himself and has no one to turn to.
You're just a jerk. You always were a jerk. You're not loyal to anyone but yourself. I saw you throw your wife under the bus. I saw you throw all your girlfriends under the bus. I saw you throw your friends under the bus. I saw you throw all your bandmates under
If
the
I could
bus.
say one thing in Anthony's defense, getting divorced is not throwing your wife under the like. He had a terrible marriage and an ugly divorce. That's not. It's not. It's not the same as being disloyal to someone.
Bus. I saw you throw me under the bus. I gave you the biggest break of your stupid life.
Pause.
You're loyal to
No one. I have been accused of many, many things in my day. One thing I can tell you that no one has ever accused me of is being disloyal. My loyalty over the course of my life has gone beyond the call of loyalty duty. Everyone that knows me would attest to that. Even the people that worked at Compound Media, having, within the past year or so, been fired because we were, melding the two camps together from Censored and Compound. They would even have a very tough time arguing that I was disloyal in any way. I kept that company going on fumes and made sure every fucking pay period they all got paid. I literally withdrew money from my savings account to put into the corporate account so that those paychecks would go out on time. That's what I do. That's what my loyalty to my staff was.
And I'm not going to pretend to know Anthony personally at all, obviously. And I do think Anthony plays a bigger part in this than people give credit for. I'm sure Anthony wasn't perfect to work with either. But when you look at Opie, it's hard to even interject that. It's hard to suggest, hey, Anthony has his flaws too, when Opie is so egregiously wrong about everything he's saying. You don't even have time to address what Anthony might have done wrong because Opie is so in your face with all of everything he's wrong about. His list of of terrible takes about this, where he's like, Anthony was disloyal to all these people. Jim, Sam, Travis, E-Rock worked for Anthony for 10 years. Like all these people on the show and associated with the show hung around with Anthony for a long time. And then some distanced themselves like Bill Burr because of Anthony's like political takes and shit. But that's not disloyalty. Like as he says, Anthony's a lot of things. Loyalty isn't really a factor in his relationships. It doesn't seem.
Anthony paid Gino Bisconti for years to be his
Right.
drinking buddy. So, I mean,
Right. Who needed that show? But Anthony was like, he's a good guy. Imagine it. Imagine having a salaried employee because they're a good guy.
He's fun at the bar. You're hired.
Right.
Now,
This one's called Relationships.
But it's kind of on the same theme where like, well, who's left in Opie's life if Anthony's disloyal?
this, on the other hand, when you talk about loyalty, I've never worked with or known someone who has fucked more people over under this false guise of being friends or coworkers or something than Greg Opie Hughes. He acts like a scorned girlfriend, like a woman. And then friends? What friends? I am dear friends, real friends, with the same friends I've had from the time I was in high school. So from that entire time period, from the time I was 16 till now, I have made and kept friends. This guy, I hear about one or two frat boys that he's known over the course of the years, and then that's it. And then there's just people he feels he can use and utilize to get another jump up on the social media, YouTube thing, whatever it is. Whether it was Carl or the comedian of the week, and now it's these Gephardt guys. Whatever his friend of the week is that could help him, that could give him a place to do his show, a bar. that could give him material. There's a nutty guy that comes in and just spouts off insane rhetoric. They supply him with beers down at this bar, I guess. I don't know. I don't know the financial arrangement. I guarantee you, though, that they're making no money. I've said this 1,000 times. There is not one person that I know of that we have worked with over the course of the Opie and Anthony show that have remained friends with Greg Opie Hughes. I don't know one. Every single one of them. I went to WAAF for their farewell broadcast. I went on the shows, Mistress Carrie. We went out, we drank, we laughed, talked about good old times at WAAF. The only time Opie's name came up was when people were conveying a story about what a prick he was to them. But it's my fault.
I like that we played clips with the N-word, and then these clips have the F-word bleeped out.
Selective.
How magically influenced all these people. It's batshit thinking. There's a reason. If the majority of people you've ever known or worked with don't like you, it's you.
It is kind of amazing, and that's another point that Anthony's made a million times over the years. But it is amazing when you think about it that there's not one guy. I'm not talking about best friends. Like, it seems like Anthony and Jim are friendly, and E-Rock worked with Anthony at Compound Media and stuff. I don't think you need to have that level of relationship. I'm saying that it doesn't seem like there's anyone from the Opie and Anthony show, the long history, 20-year history, or even like associated with the Opie and Anthony show, like Ron Bennington. There's not one person I can think of that Opie has had on his podcast to have a friendly conversation with, or that he mentions like, hey, I talked to Ron Bennington the other day, or I talked to Sam Roberts, whoever. There's no one that he's even kept in contact with to be polite publicly. You know what I mean? I'm not saying you need to be best buddies and text all the time or anything. There is no one from that show that, like, sends a Christmas card or would come on for an interview. Like, that's the level of bridge burning that Opie did. And that is significant to say that, like, at least some of these people will say hello to Anthony if they saw them in the street. It seemed like everyone's had such a miserable time with Opie that as an observer, you really have no choice but to be like, this guy must have been the problem. Like I said, Anthony absolutely must have played some part in it. There's no one-sided relationship in that way. Like, Anthony must have contributed in some way, even if you want to just say Anthony should have called him out for his bullshit, 15 years earlier than he did or whatever. In some form or fashion, Anthony can take some blame. But the evidence is that not one person kept in contact with this guy, has a nice thing to say about him. Like, you don't even hear people now with all this shit talk pop up. Like, it's not, E-Rock doesn't come out and say, well, he actually wasn't all bad. Like, no one has a nice thing to say about the guy. He got fired for filming a guy shitting at work. Like, everyone across the board hated working with this man, and Opie's never addressed that. He just says, like, they didn't like me because I was the boss. A lot of people love their boss. A lot of people mildly dislike their boss. There's not, it doesn't have to be like, oh, well, I was above this person, so naturally they hate me. That's a uniquely Opie thing. I don't know a lot of people with that story.
Boss horror stories, definitely. We all have a little bit of those. So it just sounds like he's a terrible boss. Don't want to work with him ever again. Nope.
Sure. But even the bosses I've worked with that I didn't like probably have some, like, if they call, there's someone in their phone that if they called would be polite to them. You know what I mean? Right. Never mind, like, hang out with them. Would just say hello and be friendly.
This man only has animals at this point. That's the only thing that can love him.
Right.
This one's called Control.
Yeah, this was a big thing with Opie, is like, he would talk about his mother being a narcissist a lot and how that deeply affected him, which I believe is true, because I think it affected him to the point of a lot of his own personality traits coming through.
We would go into a meeting with the bosses, whether it was anywhere. Not so much AAF, because we didn't really have anyone working for us, But once we hit NEW and started getting a production team together, it started. Opie realized he could have something over on the people that worked for us if there was this constant threat that they were going to be fired. This is what he did. So we go into the meetings with these bosses and kind of shit talk this little subtle shit talking of a couple of members of the staff, or he'd pick one to concentrate on for a given amount of time. He'd be like, we wanted to get this done, but, I put it out there and he dropped the ball, or, I just don't hear back from these people. And the bosses, they take note. And then maybe next meeting, he brings it up again, right up until the bosses go, hey, we can replace, if you're not happy with this guy, we could absolutely replace him. I'll put an ad out. We'll go in company. We'll get somebody. And then here it comes. No. I'm not saying that. No. Look, I'll have a meeting with him and we'll turn it around. Then he goes to the person and goes, dude, I just saved your ass in there. They were ready to.
Can I say, as a listener, I guess I don't know 100%, but as a listener, I'm certain this is true, because every guy that Ben Sparks, Rick Delgado, Danny Ross, Steve Carlisi, every producer that left the Opie and Anthony show, Opie would always say, man, I saved this guy 1,000 times, and then this time I just couldn't save him when he got fired or whatever. Like I did everything to save this guy. I would always hear that. And I remember, even like as a younger man, thinking, how do all these guys get into situations where they need saving hundreds of times? Why did their job need to be saved every day? That doesn't make any sense to me. And it makes so much sense when you hear Anthony lay it out like that. That is a very passive aggressive thing to control someone, to kind of say to someone who doesn't know, someone who's not working with them up close and personal, but has that sort of power, to be like, this Ben Sparks is a real piece of shit, or Steve Carlisi is lazy, or whatever. And then save their job so that you can say, hey man, I saved your job.
Yeah. He wants a world where no one can criticize him, so he's going to go out and save everyone before they can criticize him, so he's their hero. Can't criticize me now.
But he's saving them from him, who put in their heads that they should be fired.
Well, you push someone off a cliff and you save them. Technically, you still saved them. So
It's true.
The first part.
And they're ready to hire someone else. You got to step it up, bro. So we would do this to the staff. And if you don't believe this, ask any of the staff. E-Rock, Travis, anyone that worked with us at Sirius Satellite Radio, Sirius XM, WNEW. So he would do this. And subsequently, some people would. He would, set them adrift. And Carlisi was one of those guys. Steve Carlisi. And Steve, he definitely had issues.
Okay, this was the guy they were talking about on KB that the channel went boop.
Yes. Yeah. Steve C did. So the story is that he took his own life. I believe what I've heard, and if I'm wrong, I apologize. He had one of those like stomach stapling or lap band surgeries, and there's basically a limit you can eat on those. My understanding is that he ate in a way that would end his life. You know what I mean? Like he did. Like I don't know if it's an active suicide, but like he behaved in a manner that he knew would end it all, if that makes sense. That's the story that I've heard. I don't know that that's true, but there has always been unaliving yourself, as apparently we have to say, surrounding the end of the Steve Carlisi saga. So that's what Anthony's talking about.
Yeah, and if you want to talk to someone, dial 988, and you can talk your problems, and you can,
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, it's like 911, but for mental health.
I didn't know that.
Or you can text them too.
I once called the suicide hotline, and I talked about a lot of the depression I was dealing with and everything. and I talked about being legally blind and how that affected my life. And the person on the other end of the phone said, "Oh boy, I really don't know what to tell you about that."
No.
And I said,
Oh,
"All right,
that's
well,
not so
glad I
helpful.
called. Good,
Oh,
good chatting with you. I guess I'll just hang up then."
wow.
Oh, that's
But yeah,
funny.
dial 988. I guess I'm sure they're a lot of help.
This guy, I believe, not talking out of school. I worked with him for many years, but he didn't seem like he was a happy guy. And it was kind of sad because he was very funny, talented. He was a fun guy to be around. But he
Steve
had
was a
his
great
demon.
part of the show. There's a lot of Steve C clips that I like and find very funny, and we'll go back and listen to sometimes. Steve was a very good part of the Opie and Anthony show, and he was the executive producer. And he got into a lot of shit with the staff. He's a guy I believe did have a lot of problems, and I mean obviously, Anthony's talking about his mental problems, but I'm saying like at work he had rivalries with a lot of the staff, Danny Ross in particular, but everyone he kind of butted heads with. So I believe that Steve had sort of an issue with a lot of the staff, and probably his work ethic wasn't always great and stuff. So there are elements where maybe Steve's job was often in trouble, but Opie would go the extra mile where Anthony and Jim would joke about Steve being lazy or fat on air. Opie would get really violently angry with Steve. And it was always a different tone. It was never fun. It was always like, oh boy, the jokes are kind of slowing down because Opie is so angry. And that was always an uncomfortable. If you go back and listen to old Opie and Anthony clips, it's always uncomfortable listening when Opie's talking a lot because it would be Jim and Anthony riffing and Opie being angry because he didn't have that ability to be funny and make fun of Steve. He would, basically threaten his job and be angry guy. And that's never great for comedy.
No.
And I don't think it was imperative to get rid of Steve when they did. And I think it was very detrimental to his mental health to get rid of him. I think that should have been taken into consideration when looking to get rid of that guy. And he was one of the prime guys that used to get shat upon by Opie in the meetings with the bosses.
While all true, that is one move I didn't love from Anthony, where it's like, if you know anything about mental health, there's a lot more going on than just whatever he dealt with Opie. Anthony's kind of insinuating that the reason for this guy's demise was how Opie treated him, which I never like that when people do that shit. We talked about it with Ty Rivera threw that accusation at Tony Hinchcliffe, that he made some Kill Tony member off themselves or something. And it's like that idea, if you know anything about mental health and suicide, it has nothing to do with one interaction or one relationship. It's a much greater thing. So that move I didn't love that Anthony throws out there. And Opie's response, which I heard on WATP, great show, by the way. You should check it out. I heard on that show that Opie said, he's like, well, Anthony didn't go to Steve's funeral, and I did. And it's like on both for both of them. What are you guys doing now? This is now a fucking ping pong match between who treated Steve Carlisi better. This is where I wish they would talk about these issues, because when they don't, it just gets very petty like this. So that was part of the argument I didn't really like, and then it just fuels people on Reddit to be like, Opie, you did this to Steve C. When I'm sure Opie didn't help, but like that's not what contributes to that. So that part I didn't love, but I do think it's interesting to hear Anthony talk about the way Opie treated a lot of the people around the show at that time. And it does make you kind of look back the way Opie talks about Anthony now, where he's like, you're garbage. You've always been garbage. I've always hated you. I believe the real Opie is the guy that cried on air and was sad that he lost his friend. Like, he was legitimately the first time they got into it, Opie wept openly on air. And I think that was the real Opie, a guy that was sad that he's not friends with this man anymore. And everything after that has kind of just been fake bravado and shit. So
Last one here is called Out of Place.
oh, right. Okay. I forgot we had one more. Let's hear it.
And part of the reason was the recognition that myself and Jimmy got for what we were there for, the show, being entertaining, being interesting, being compelling, being funny, getting the accolades, the bits that people would talk about when we're out on appearances. Opie would have to sit there while we're signing and have people come up to me and Jimmy and go, God damn, dude, I had to pull my car off the road when you guys were talking about this, that, the other thing. And Opie's just sitting there. No one mentioned one of Opie's bits, segments. You know, oh, remember he threw the poker chips at the woman. Yeah, remember that. Oh my God, he smashed the CD and Bernie gets one crazy. Sure, great one. What have you done for me lately? And when that really started taking hold, he needed a position, a place in this show, because he was starting to feel like he didn't have a place. He said that before. I felt like I was an outcast on my own show. So it went like that for a while, and he thought, well, I'll be the guy that they're afraid of. I'll get that respect out of fear. I won't sign a contract until 1 minute before it's due, letting everyone sit around wondering if they have a job tomorrow. They've been working at this job for years. They have families. And Opie sitting there going, will I sign? Won't I sign? I'll wait 1 minute to 6 and I might sign it. Imagine putting your employees through that. They're not going to look at it and go, wow, that was so cool. I respect that guy. They're going to go, what an asshole. And then years later, when they talk to people and his name comes up, they're going to go, what an asshole. So he wants to talk about loyalty. He wants to shit on me about loyalty. Get the out of here. I'm an internet tough guy. Just ask Kevin Brennan. He's incapable of answering this back. He can shit on me more. He'll do that. But he'll never be able to address everything I just said about the friends and former employees and bosses even.
And that is why Anthony's side of the story is so much more believable than Opie's. Because, just listen to the clips we played. You've heard Opie before. Such a more talented and articulate broadcaster. He's able to convey his points, and that is helpful in these one-sided arguments. It is also why, like I said, I wish they would have this out on air, because I don't know what the next step is. Are you guys just going to keep doing this into your 70s where Opie says something, and then Opie says something, and then Opie says something, and then Anthony gets fed up with it, so eventually he says something? Is that cycle just going to keep repeating? Because I don't know where else this goes.
I think because it is so lopsided, and so one person is so clearly like in the high ground and correct, and one person is so clearly wrong, that it's going to go on forever. Because Anthony just will forget about it because he'll take the high ground, and then Opie will say 20 bad things in a row, and he'll have to get back down and talk about it. If they were more equal, they'd have to squash it because it's destroying them both equally. But it's not equal.
It's why Opie would never have that debate, and Anthony would. I believe that Anthony would be willing to do that. He's going to
lose the debate. He's not going to the debate you're going to lose.
Right.
You know?
And when you hear a guy like Anthony break it down point by point, and the response from the other guy is he's just garbage. He's an asshole.
Doggy.
He's a piece of shit. Isn't he racist, guys? Yeah. It's like, well, that's got nothing to do with the argument. Now, maybe Opie has a lot of great points. Like I said, I'm sure Anthony contributed to the negativity in that relationship somehow. But we never know it because Opie's incapable of articulating that.
Yeah. And just a reminder, the author that wrote the book with Anthony and talks with Anthony, every week said 100% he's doing this just to spite Opie, just so it takes that argument away.
I would bet there's some element of also just fuck you to kind of traditional media and everything as well. Yeah. Like to Sirius XM for firing him and all that stuff. I'm sure there's some element of it that he just wants to get back on radio to show everyone he can do it. But yeah, I do love the spite. I love spite employment. That's hilarious to me.
Or spite volunteering even. He might be volunteering just. All right, we ready for some super chats, Electra?
Oh, sure.
Alrighty, Joe from Virginia. Have a great show, boys. Long live the Daylords.
Thank you, buddy.
Hey, thank you so much. All right. Oh, it's the same one. Sorry. Here we go. Icon buckets.
Casey wanted to show that one again.
I did. I couldn't believe it.
I think Casey wants to read this one.
Icon buckets, $2. Cumia did not try to. Oh, okay.
Go ahead. What did he say? Navigate it
for
as
it.
best you can.
There's an accusation that maybe Cumia was involved with some younger ladies. I'll just put it that
a
way.
lot of people have said that.
Yeah.
There's a great. Is it Beige Frequency? I think it's Beige Frequency. Maybe Porcelain did one as well. But Beige Frequency has covered this. I don't know the validity of those claims, but
Yeah,
it has
I
been
come-
made on the internet.
Icon Buckets ends it with hashtag not a good guy. I can read that part. And go ahead, Electra. Thank you for putting that.
You are so welcome. The one pun, $2. Opie was never the funny one. He doesn't get that.
Yes, the
It's-
self-awareness.
Tough for him to handle. Yeah.
All right, we got a few more here.
Joseph Collins, $4.99. Just imagine being Opie's wife going to sleep every night.
I
Is
was
she a
on,
full-blown alcoholic now?
I was on with ROTC, and we came to the conclusion. Right? Do you think it's possible Opie's family doesn't exist? Because you never there's never noise in the background. He doesn't really have stories about his family, which he's always been kind of a private guy in that respect, which I have zero problem with. But like there's never, I was doing this with my kids earlier, or here's something funny my wife said.
Nothing in the
like-
background ever. No trinkets of a child or another person.
It's an
living in the house
interesting
on the street.
theory to suggest they don't exist. I'm not saying it's true, but it is interesting.
Show us your family, Opie. All right, a few more here.
Dang Lizard, €2. No one has anything positive to say about Opie/Carl.
Right, the two monsters to work. That's a good.
Go to blindmike.net for everything Blind Mike. Look at me. I did it. Kragers did it.